No cookies for any of those people. So, okay, well, let me just read off the order of the bills. First bill will be Senate Bill 371, Senator Hayes. Senate Bill 382, Senator Washington. 874, Senator Washington. 506, Senator Muse. 535, Senator James. And 651, Senator Carter. So, Senator Hayes. Antonio, welcome to the committee. I think the first time in this term. It's great to see you, sir.
It is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of ENT. Senator Antonio Hayes from the 40th Legislative District in Baltimore City, for the record. But this is my very first time in front of your committee, and it's a pleasure to be here on such an important piece of legislation. Senate Bill 371 creates an opportunity for the state to really promote economic development and tourism on Baltimore's waterfront. This bill was unanimously supported by both the House and the Senate delegations for Baltimore City, both receiving favorable, including your very own, our House sponsor, Delegate Regina Boyce, who's here. This bill, as I said previously, seeks to support state-level clarification of conforming interpretation of allowable uses in the underlying commercial district adjacent to the waterfront with the appropriate radius of a transit rail line. This bill clarifies that mixed-use development, specifically multifamily property, is an allowable use in a catchment area within this legislation. This bill will ensure that the state interest is promoting tourism, a clean harbor, a healthy Chesapeake Bay are protected appropriately represented as major drivers of the state's economy. To be clear, this bill does not interfere with Baltimore City Council, Planning Commission, and Mayor's administration role in reviewing and approving any plans for redevelopment along Baltimore waterfront. With that, Mr. Chair, I recommend a favorable report for Senate Bill 371.
Yeah, you have no opponents and nobody else.
I know.
Well, obviously it's sponsor only, so nobody. Yeah. But we don't have any opponents. Any questions for the senator? I actually have one. So basically, this bill implements a required change in state law that will allow the city of Baltimore to move forward, correct?
Yes, correct. And this is really, really important to us. Many of you all, whether residents or visitors to Baltimore, know that our waterfront is the pride and joy. And so this allows greater flexibility, so the possibilities of future development can capture the hearts and minds of all of our visitors, both locally as well as regionally.
Okay, Delegate Boyce has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Hayes. It's so glad to see you here.
Indeed.
And just for clarification for the rest of the body, while it mentions, for instance, multifamily housing, it does not require
correct
multifamily housing. Is that so?
Yeah, it's simply an allowable use, but it does not require multifamily housing at all. You're correct.
Okay, there appear to be no further questions, so Senator, you leave the committee unscathed.
Thank you so much. It has been a joy to share this afternoon with you.
Oh, no,
thank you so very
much more of a joy for us, Senator.
Indeed, thank you.
Okay, let's now turn to Senate Bill 382. Senator Washington is not, and there she is. Like magic, here she appears. I'll allow you to get situated for 382. Yeah, it's that time of session where we're all running around, so. Senator, welcome back to the committee.
Hi, it's Tuesday. This must be Environment and Transportation. Great, very good. Good afternoon, colleagues. It's good to see you. For the record, I'm Senator Mary Washington. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce this legislation. You did hear this bill about accessory dwelling units, and it's cross-filed with Delegate Long, and it was heard in this committee. However, the posture, as you see, the Senate bill before you has incorporated a number of amendments to address concerns of our counties and municipalities as well as other stakeholders. So as amended, the bill removes the word promotion. Most task forces, if we use the term promotion, it conveys an end already. And so I wanted it to be a more objective terminology, so just removing that from the task force. Additionally, we added specific that there should be a focus on the differences or opportunities or challenges faced by urban communities, suburban communities, and rural, that we should make those distinctions. We also updated the task force to include the representatives of those different types of communities. And we added additional members to the for MACO as well as MML. So there would be 2 representatives from MACO and 2 representatives from MML, as well as the Building Industry Association. We added the Community Associations Institute because we wanted to make sure that there was that insight, as well as the American Institute of Architects, AARP, because one of the policy solutions or policy implications of this when it comes to providing affordable housing, housing that's close to amenities, is visited upon our senior population. And then also the Coalition of Interior Designers, that they, that there's a way that these should be contemplated. And there's places where it's appropriate, and there are places where they're not appropriate, and so to take those into consideration. Additionally, we felt that rather than having the governor appoint the chair, that the members of the task force would be best capable of electing a chair. And we also made some revisions to the guidance to the task force and their recommendations, particularly around the infrastructure, and taking into account impacts on the existing character of a community. A lot of the opposition or concerns come from, hey, we have this close-knit community, we're worried about that. So we wanted to check that on and discuss it. Again, the phrasing of some of the guidance was shifted to be more objective and less from an advocacy, so that it reads less like a policy statement and more of a true inquiry into the current status. So for that reason, and also we changed the timing so that there would be a good year of this discussion, but also we reduced it such that it wouldn't be so long that should the body decide that it wants to take action before the end of our terms, that there would be plenty of room to do this. Why I continue to press this is that ADUs do have a history in our country, that they've been used, that they provide access at times for affordable reason, and it seems like some of the prohibitions also correlate with some restrictive housing in the 50s and 60s. So for this reason, I do ask for your favorable report, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, we do have one question. However, I'd like to go through all the favorable and favorable with amendment witnesses, and then we'll turn to questions. So first, pure favorable, Lisa May with the Maryland Realtors, and on deck shortly thereafter, Dominic Butchko and Angelica Bailey-Tupari. So why don't you all come on up or situate yourselves so that we can move along, and then we do have a number of questions. Okay, Lisa, welcome back to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. Lisa May with the Maryland Realtors. I feel like every time I come before this committee, I am talking about the housing shortage that we have here in Maryland, and I'll spare you from that today. But it's just to say that our housing needs are very real, they are significant, and they are growing. We see other states addressing their housing shortages in a comprehensive way, and by and large, to this point, we are not. Maryland likes to lead on a number of issues, but when it comes to housing, by and large, we are not. We need to start taking positive steps to address our housing issues. This bill may not be the bill that some of us wanted starting out this session, but it is the bill that we have, the bill where we can reach a consensus, and it is a step forward, and it is desperately, desperately needed. So we urge you in the strongest possible terms to please support this legislation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, favorable with amendments, Dominic Butchko.
If it's okay, Mr. Chair, I'm going to take this one. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Angelica Bailey-Thupari with the Maryland Municipal League. I'm very proud to speak for both MML and MACO on this. We are very appreciative of the sponsors' collaboration on this bill. There have been many conversations, many amendments, several late nights. We are very excited right now to be in a support with amendment posture, but that is simply because the current draft that came over from the Senate did not include the 2 extra local government seats that Senator Washington alluded to. So with that change, we would be very much in support. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Dominic.
Dominic Butchko, Maryland Association of Counties. Me too.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and actually, Angelica, that was a perfect lead-in. Senator, you mentioned a couple of things, for example, the 1 versus 2 folks from MML and MACO, and then there was something else in here that was different than the reprint.
Yes.
Are those amendments that you're providing to the committee now, or?
We will. I was not aware that it was different, so we're still juggling that. That was not the intent. We had submitted it. Well, we saw it. We saw the amendments, so we're not quite sure how it didn't. And we passed those amendments in the committee. Not sure how it didn't translate to the drafting office. So as far as I'm concerned, the amendments have been submitted. If I need to resubmit them, or if this committee needs to amend those amendments on, please do that.
Okay, I also didn't see the part about the task force picking the chair versus the governor in here, so I'm sure the subcommittee will figure all that out.
Okay,
Thank you.
I drafted those amendments.
I actually wanted to ask about that last thing. I might be wrong about this, but it seems like in most task forces of this kind, the governor chooses the chair. Could you tell me what the rationale or the reasoning behind making that change was?
Well, it's not the case that it's always that way.
No, it's not always.
Right, so the rationale was that this group is going to be working together for a while. You know, 2, in some ways, unlike some sort of more high-profile appointments, not that, of course, every single task force is important, but this is, I would see it more as a working group, is more of the frame. And so in the working group models, it's been my observation that the group elects that. But I wouldn't want, that's not something that should bar the passage of the bill. And if it's in your hands right now, and so if you feel that the governor's best suited, then.
Yeah, I remember when I was on Ways and Means and Martin was the governor, I was on a couple of tax-related task forces, and all of those instances, the governor picked the chair. So
Yeah,
anyway, okay, well.
It's not it was a request, and some of the
Okay.
members felt that they wanted that, but certainly the governor would be welcome to
Okay.
be a part of this.
Well, okay. Any other questions for the senator on this bill or any of the other witnesses? Seeing none, thank you very much. There are no opponents, so that ends the public hearing on Senate Bill 382. Let's go to Senate Bill 874, also Senator Washington, and it's sponsor only, so I think, no, it's, yeah, it is.
Okay.
No, it's not. It's not, I'm sorry.
Okay. I was thinking I had to go to HGO. Thank you.
Come on up.
I'm sorry, what bill do you have?
874.
Okay. I have 874. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Hi. Senator Washington here for Senate Bill 874. And now here, this is a bill to codify a program that has been in operation at least for the last 2 or 3 years, and out of the Department of Housing and Community Development, where it has provided a $10 million appropriation each year for a grant program that has supported over 54 local business districts and about 250 nonprofit organizations, with grants ranging in size from $66,000 to $100,000. And the grant program, as originally administered, was just called the Community Safety Works Program. We added health because we feel that both safety and health are very important to be brought together. And so what this bill would do would be to maintain, excuse me, the program and extend a $10 million appropriation that may be allocated, and it would be continued to be administered by the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. And it would have 3 different areas. One is to support facilities and community improvement, and you can request grants in the amounts of $25,000. One grant program would be focused on business districts and neighborhood safety programs, and the third would be community-centered crime and violence intervention and preventions programs that can range from $75,000 to $150,000. And overall, our goals would be that this money could continue to be used by our communities to really reinforce community ownership, solidarity among the communities, innovative approaches and community-centered approaches to creating safe commercial corridors, to allow for ways to protect both pedestrian crosswalks, to potentially identify for business districts to purchase, or communities to purchase, technology that would facilitate being able to manage car traffic as well as pedestrian traffic, to do some environmental landscaping that is consistent with creating safer places, some lighting, all the types of things. And so, again, this would be to codify the program so that it would continue. The amendment that you had before you, I hope, should say that rather than a memorandum of understanding, that there should be a partnership. And specifically, if someone is requesting funding for a grant program in cooperation with their local law enforcement, we would suggest and recommend that there is an agreement, or that it's demonstrated that there is a cooperation between the local community and law enforcement. So for that, I ask for your favorable committee report. Again, these funds have been used all over the state, and I think we should continue it.
Okay, thank you very much. We have one question, Delegate Boyce.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Good to see you, Senator.
Good to see you.
Quick question. This is, as I read it, a may bill and not a shall? Yeah?
Yes, so the Senate has taken the posture this year. Certainly, as drafted, I had it as a shall, mandating the appropriation. Certainly, I would support that, but the Budget Committee felt that it would make it a may, so that it can be funded up to $10 million. But the committee is happy to do what it wishes to do.
No, I was reading the Department of Budget and Management's letter about, I guess, it hasn't been updated.
Right now,
about
they
the current.
wouldn't they didn't.
Thank
Yep.
you so much, Senator.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Senator, quick question on the facility money. Is that a public facility or a private facility, or both?
Well, it's mostly to target, say, if there's a main street, if there's a commercial corridor, So it can be for, it has to be nonprofit, so it can't be for a for-profit entity. So if a nonprofit is managing some green spaces or managing some commercial corridors, a number of our communities have nonprofit organizations that are working to organize them, then that facility facade improvement could go for that.
But could it be used for a nonprofit to build a building?
No, I don't think they can build a building for $150,000, but
Okay.
I'd like to see it.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Senator Washington? Seeing none, thank you very much. Have a great day.
You too, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate your patience.
Oh, yeah. Listen, it's almost literally the least I can do. Okay, let's go to Senate Bill 506, Senator Muse. I don't see him out there, but I do see Mary Delaney James. So why don't you come on up, and we'll take you next. This is the Housing Discrimination Service Dog Bill.
Oh, it's so nice to see you, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, it's great
Mr.
to see you
Vice
too.
Chairman, and I still see some familiar faces, and I hope over the next 4 years I get to know everybody else on the committee. For the record, Senator Mary Delaney James, representing Harford County District 34. And I do think, if I'm correct, the committee should be familiar with this bill, as there is the cross-filed bill, House Bill 608. So just for the record, very briefly, because I want to address the amendments, the bill is to intend to expand the protections for people who have service animals. You know, generally, the law is now that if you have a service animal, you can rent or buy a property. If there's a no pet policy or if they're trying to charge fees, you can't do that. And this bill tries to address a small but significant problem in the disability community, where these dogs or animals, it's dogs that we're talking about here, have to be retired, and it's very difficult to rehome them, and oftentimes very hard on both the owner and the dog. So this is an opportunity to allow those dogs to remain in retirement with their owner. I want to just back up to address why we had a couple of different amendments, and hopefully we're going to get on the same page here. So when I was approached for the bill, it was definitely from the National Federation of the Blind, and I'm glad that Ron Offman is here, and it was definitely micro-focused on guide dogs or service dogs, either one, but that was the intent, and that's what all our focus was, and that's why the bill started out as it did. But either the day of the hearing, the night before, or the day after, I got a pretty long, and I assume you all have it too, a letter of information from the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. And they do rightfully point out 3 or 4 issues with the legislation. How are we defining service dog and guide dog? Now that I know, neither of which is a term of art in existing law. And then how do we define retirement? Who would determine retirement? And then, you know, the issue sort of between emotional animals versus service animals. So really kind of understanding that that commission is the one that will have to interpret, mediate, and, you know, enforce this law should it get passed. I tried in my own modest way to amend it in a way that's really honed in on the blind and the deaf, because in my thinking was those dogs are really highly trained, sometimes $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. Sometimes they have to have a hard stop retirement because of the safety issues when they go outside. And I shared that with landlords who said, yes, we really understand that dynamic and we support it. Now, having said all that, I now realize with some more information that some additional community organizations that are also rely on dogs for disabilities, you know, people that are wheelchair bound or have mobility issues, they too have dogs that are trained, sometimes very intensely, and also may face the same issue. So despite the back and forth, as I've seen the last version, I think, of the House's proposed amendment, which is taking the first 2 lines of the ADA, Americans with Disability Act language, and then codifying it so it's a little broader. Also had a wonderful conversation with Ronza to work with the the Human Rights Commission over the interim, because they do have some issues, and we should address them. I was trying to do it in this bill, but I don't want to stop this bill if we don't have to. So I'll stop there, because that's a lot, and see if there are any questions, and if I can be of any further help on the legislation.
There are at least two questions. So let me recognize Delegate Guyton to start with.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for bringing this bill. I do have the amendments in front of me, actually, that I hear are being discussed this week sometime, hopefully in this committee.
Okay.
And I just wanted to make sure that you have seen those and you had a hand in writing those. I appreciate that, two things, that you are actually defining the service dog in Maryland law. I think that's incredibly important.
Right.
And I also wanted to just give a special shout out to the Federation of the Blind, with whom I'm working on other legislation, because they came earlier and said that they really wanted to fight so that they were not the only ones included in this bill, that the blind and the deaf were not the only ones. And I believe that's how the Senate had amended the bill. Is that correct?
Yeah, when I went through, as I said, I was approached only by them, and they were the only ones that testified, and
Right.
all their testimony only dealt with guide dogs. So it was after our bill hearing that I think that community was approached by others. And then they swung back sort of after we'd already amended the bill to explain that
Sure.
even though they were focusing on guide dogs, they didn't want to look or appear or actually be in conflict with other disability community members
Yes.
that would like it expanded.
Okay, so I think that's impressive and really generous of them, because they were already getting what they wanted in the Senate version of the bill. So I just wanted to point that out to this
Yeah.
committee. Wonderful group to work with. I do recognize, though, that the Senate also cut out any reference to emotional support animals. Can you speak a little bit about that?
I never had that in the Senate bill.
Okay. So the bill that we're looking at is not a direct cross-file from the House bill?
I don't know what your bill looked like originally. If it was the same as mine, then you dealt with the fact that we use service dog and guide dog, then you probably got word that neither one of those.
I actually think
I'm
our
sorry.
legal counsel might be able to answer that question, so hold on. No. Push your button again? Oh. Just talk really loud.
Delegate Guyton.
Oh, no, there you go.
Delegate Guyton, I think you're looking at a copy of the amendment that I've drafted up, not something that's officially done on the Senate bill. If you're looking for the Senate version of the bill, it's on the MGA website. What it actually came over in the Senate version of the bill is on the MGA website.
Sorry, my question was, were the bills initially identical with the House file? Can I just ask?
Oops, hold on. You know what, let's have this crosstalk in the subcommittee, because I think that's a better place for it.
My question really reflects the fact that we had discussed emotional support dogs in our House unit.
I see.
They're not part of this bill. So
I see.
Right, so I was just wondering whether the bill had taken those out
No.
for amendment, or they were never.
No, the only discussion was with the Federation of the Blind, and then we then after all of that, and then the letter we got from the commission, right? We went in and looked at the ADA language, which has a very good definition of service animal, which is a dog that provides these services that are working dogs that do these tasks. And then there's a definition of the kind of people with disabilities that they confine themselves to. So that's the language your amendment has, and that's the amendment that that I've said to the groups that I would support as well.
Okay, thank you so much for
Thank
that.
you.
I'm sorry, I was just confused because I was thinking it was a direct cross file. Thanks so much.
Yeah, right.
Delegate Healy.
Thank you, and welcome. Good to
Hi,
see
it's
you.
so good to see you.
I want to focus into on the same idea, because I haven't had a chance to see the amendment. I know that a lot of former military people have trained dogs that are service animals for them, but they're not limited to, blind and deaf. They have people who dealing with seizures and also PTSD
Right.
and other things that may be psychological issues as well. And so I wondered if your definition, which I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to read, includes those kind of things or not.
The way I understand the House, which I'm agreeing to, because I know exactly, I did a lot of research in this, but if you would read the ADA language, it says a service animal means any dog that is individually trained to do work or perform tasks for the benefit of an individual with a disability, including a physical, sensory, psychiatric, intellectual, or other mental disability.
Okay.
Now, because we don't exactly draft our bills with that identical language, the bill drafters over in the House have sort of broken it up and captured those two sentences in the amendments in the House, which now I'm saying that makes sense. We should agree to do that on both sides.
Okay, thank you so much, I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator. Thank you, first of all, for your commitment to this and working with the advocacy groups and my office to try to get us all on the same page. I also was confused initially about the term service dog versus guide dog, and then this third concept of emotional support dogs, which I know what they are, but then that got introduced into the conversation. So even, Mr. Chairman, I think it goes to show you it's
Yes.
seemingly the most straightforward bill, often is not. But we are both committed to getting on the same page with this.
And I want
Thank you.
to say back at you, thank you so very, very much. And again, the language came from the Federation of the Blind, and then it was only after we put that language in, we found out we had issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody is united by a desire to make
Yeah.
sure that all the advocacy communities, especially the Federation for the Blind's interests, are taken into account. So.
Right.
Okay, there appear to be no further questions. And so after all that, welcome to the committee and have a nice day.
Thank you all. Really good to see all of
Yeah.
you, and glad to be working with you.
Okay,
Take care.
it's
Bye-bye.
mutual. All right, so let's go back to Senate Bill 506. I see Senator Muse is out there. And welcome back to the committee, Senator. And,
My pleasure, sir. My pleasure, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, and members of the House Environmental and Transportation Committee. It's good to be back. And I know you've had a long day and will continue to do so. So I'll be very brief in what I want to say because you're very familiar with the bill that I want to present. SB 506 is actually the cross-file for HB 825 that was sponsored by Delegate Veronica Turner, and it passed this committee with no opposition. It's just will grant the town of Forest Heights, it's a local bill, and that's the only municipality that I have in my district in Prince George's County. It would give them the authority to exercise urban renewal powers to use for blight clearance and redevelopment. They will be able to acquire and repurpose and/or hold and sell vacant and blighted properties for. Now, Prince George's County has had this power for over 50 years, and 18 municipalities, as you know, in Prince George's already have this authorization, and 67 across the state of Maryland. So, in fact, one of the reasons, or as an example, there's an elementary school that's been vacant and deteriorating for more than 18 years. This bill would allow the town of Forest Heights to acquire this property and really put it in some good condition. So that's all that this bill does. And so I want to thank you, hopefully, for your favorable report as you did for the companion bill of this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming, Mr. Senator. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So the House bill that passed and the Senate bill that passed only differ in 2 words, which is that we got a request from the Prince George's House delegation to add the 2 words "and residential" to our bill to allow the eminent domain authority to be used by the town for both residential and commercial properties. My understanding is the Senate either failed to, refused to add those 2 words. I just didn't know if you had an opinion about whether or not you wanted to give the town the authority to do residential eminent domain or not.
Actually, I'm not sure if it was the delegation as opposed to the standing committee to which it went.
Okay.
And so I've got to find out because I didn't. I figure you'll somewhere between here and conference committee, you'll get it straight.
Okay.
I don't have a preference about that
Okay.
one way or the other.
We'll probably tack residential back on since that's the way we passed it, but if the Senate or House delegation doesn't want us to, we want to have local courtesy, so just let us know.
Thank you. I think one of the if I may, some of the concerns were we had never discussed that with Forest Heights in terms of the commercial, and people in that municipality had some fears about it being residential.
Got it.
About it, what did it mean for homes and that sort of thing. We couldn't answer that. And so I think that at least with the Finance Committee, they don't want it. And I don't really, it's not really a fight. If it's not really a priority for you, then we'll know. But Forest Heights, I'm not really sure. Okay.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Any further questions for the senator? Seeing none, thank you very much. Have a great
Thank you all. Y'all
afternoon.
continue to have a good day.
Okay, you too. All righty then, let's turn now to Senator Carter, Senate Bill 651, the last bill of the afternoon. Get here. There we go. And there are a number of people who are testifying on this. So, Senator, welcome to the committee.
Oh, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Am I to be alone, or can I bring up a panel?
Bring up whoever you would like. I see Lisa Mays out there, and I suppose that must be Ari Plout. Frank Boston's not here, so.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, committee. It's a pleasure to be before you today. My first time this year, and I don't get over here very often. I'm Senator Jill Carter from Baltimore City, and I represent District 41. This bill is a bill that I think is a very good consumer bill and good for our constituents. I'll tell you what it does in just a moment, but I shared on my side a situation when I remember when I bought my first home, and I had saved up just enough money to put down on the home, and I'd worked on getting my credit good, and so I was very proud of myself to be in that situation. And then I found a house I absolutely loved. It's still in Mount Washington. It was by a Japanese architect, and I still really mourn that home because I wanted to live there so badly. Unfortunately, though, it didn't pass inspection, and I wound up having to get my deposit back. And I'm very thankful that I got my deposit back expediently because I was able to purchase another home. What this bill does is ensure that people like me and people like our constituents that put a deposit down on a home and then for some reason, no fault of their own, they're unable to go through with the contract of sale, they're able to get their deposits back without having to have undue delay. So I've just explained what the bill does. I want to just say that, to my knowledge, there is not opposition to the bill. In fact, I felt that at our Senate hearing, all sides were in agreement to the bill. I also want to mention that the bill is also named after Anthony Mormon, who was a dear friend of former Delegate Chanel Branch, who brought the bill last year, my understanding. And Anthony Mormon was her friend. This happened to him. It put him in a very bad situation. And unfortunately for him, he has now passed away. With that, I gave you the personal story. I'll let the others tell you the details, or I'm here to answer any questions. But I really think this is a good bill, and I hope that we can move it forward. It passed the Senate unanimously. Not that that's persuasive to you all.
One thing, I understand that the real estate section of the Bar Association has given us unfavorable testimony. But in any case, looks like Lisa wants to go next, so you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, Lisa May with Maryland Realtors. This is one of our priority pieces of legislation this year, and Senator Carter explained it very well. If all goes according to plan with a real estate contract, you exercise a contingency that's in there, you should be able to get your deposit back. Unfortunately, to get that deposit back, it requires the seller to sign a release form. And sometimes there can be hard feelings when a transaction falls through and the seller just refuses to sign that release. And when that happens, those deposits can be held up for years or for decades. And when we are talking about particularly a first-time buyer, a lower income buyer, just like Senator Carter, they had scraped together all of the funds that they have to put down that deposit, and they just don't have another source that they could go to put down another deposit and move forward with another transaction. This is modeled off of a similar process that's currently in place in Pennsylvania, and it has cut down on the number of disputed deposits that we see there. Delegate Wells had the cross-file of this bill before you earlier this month, and as Senator Carter mentioned, it passed the Senate unanimously earlier this month as well. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay. Yes, go ahead, Ari.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Ari Plout, and I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Realtors in strong support of Senate Bill 651. Thank you, Senator Carter, for sponsoring this bill. You've heard why it's so great, and we definitely believe this is a great bill. As stated numerous times, this bill passed out of the Senate unanimous. The bill will speed up the process when earnest money deposit can be returned, when a buyer would properly terminate a contract by exercising a contingency in the contract. For example, if there was a termite inspection that would fail, and the buyer wants to terminate the contract, rather than have to wait through the court system, and as Lisa stated, for the seller to release, this bill will allow the broker to return the deposit money to the buyer. And the bill still allows alternative methods of resolution. The bill still allows for mediation, and interpleader is still, this bill doesn't get rid of those. And the bill just expedites the process, and we ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, I do have a question, and that is, since there is the one unfavorable testimony, I wonder if any of you had read it and if you have any reaction to it.
Mr. Chairman, I have not read the letter. I looked at in the Senate, was unaware that there was a opposition from the Real Estate Commission.
This is the
No, it
Maryland
wasn't
Bar.
the real, it was, who was it? It was the real property section of the bar?
Okay.
MSBA real
Okay.
property section.
Yeah, I have not
and the
read their
bill-
comments on the House version, Mr. Chair, but I did read the ones on the Senate. I think that there's just,
Oh, and the builders are opposed too, yeah,
yeah,
okay.
I think that there's just a slight disagreement on the process, because this is a new process that we're proposing. On page 8, lines 10 through 24 and 29 through 32, really gets to the heart of what this new process is. And we're not asking the holder of the deposit money to judge the worthiness of who gets the money back or not. But in those lines, it simply says that if you're holding the deposit funds, you need to see, did you receive a dispute from the seller within 10 days? Did the seller provide you proof that they're seeking mediation, or did they show you proof that they are seeking relief in court within the 10 days that this outlines? That's all, and that's kind of a yes/no question. If the seller does dispute it, it proceeds through those processes, however they may be, however the mediation or the court process plays out. So we don't think that they are being asked, one, to fully resolve these within 30 days, or even to determine who is right and who is wrong in the dispute. It's, did they get the notice from the seller within 10 days?
Okay. Any further questions here? Delegate Healy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this bill. I remember when things were done much less formally, and when we bought our house way back when, the first house we bought, we had a contingency, and we ended up not being able to buy the house. But at that time, the realtor attached our deposit check to the contract, and when we said we didn't want it, he just tore up the check, and it was never deposited, and we were able to move on our merry way and get another house. I understand that is no longer the practice. Is that correct?
It may depend. There are some contingencies that take much longer into the escrow process to resolve themselves. So if it was something that came up immediately before the deposit had been put into an escrow account, then yes, it may be true that you could just rip up the check and walk away. But once those funds have been deposited, then you have to go through the release process. So if a home doesn't appraise, you may not know that, or if you're financing or something, you know, something falls through much later in the process, then those funds have already been deposited.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure this out. I'm a little slow. Okay, so you guys want the money to be back to the would-be purchaser in a timely manner. I get that. The opposition, the builders, and all these folks say, well, it's a fact-specific inquiry. Sometimes these things can remain in litigation. Whether or not a contingency was reached or not, whether or not it was the potential seller or the potential buyer's fault, or fault is something that goes through this court process. So if we start giving the money away back to the would-be buyer too early, then that could hamper the litigation efforts. But what y'all are saying is, if the other party, if the would-be seller, within 10 days of receiving a notice, shows evidence that either a request for mediation or some sort of claim is filed, then the money stays in escrow until that's resolved.
That's it.
Okay,
That's
all right,
exactly
thanks.
right. Yep.
Any further Other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. That ends the public hearing on Senate Bill 651. It ends the public hearing. How much time do we need to set up for voting session? 2 minutes, okay. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Don't go far. Next 2 weeks, so, and to update on various bills and stuff like that. So it should be a relatively quick meeting. So, okay. Do we? Okay, so the first bill and only bill is House Bill 208. Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, you all will remember this bill. It has to do with street racing and exhibition driving. As amended, HB 208 increases penalties and point assessments for violations relating to participation in racing or speed contests. The bill also establishes a statewide prohibition on exhibition driving on any highway or private property that is used for driving by the general public. Additionally, the bill authorizes a police officer to order the towing and impounding of a vehicle that is driven in a race or speed contest or is the subject of an exhibition driving violation. The subcommittee amendments are, number 1, strike the death of a person as a potential element of the violations. We struck that because it's already covered by vehicular homicide. Second, we amended for a violation of exhibition driving, we require that a person perform 2 or more of the listed acts, that the acts be intentional, and that the acts be in close proximity to a crowd or gathering. Move the amendments, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any discussion on the amendments? On the amendments? Yes. Okay, go ahead, Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just on the issue of 2 or more, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, I'm looking at the list, but if people were doing donuts, would that cover 2 or more of these, like in a parking lot if they're spinning out?
Well, if someone's doing donuts, that's only one of the elements.
Okay.
So it's got to be 2 or more of those elements.
So if people are watching, that would be 2 elements.
Well, that would satisfy the in proximity of a crowd, so that's the first portion.
I'm just concerned because that's what they do at one of the malls near me is they go up and do this, you know. But I guess
Sure,
maybe
so-
they're
so-
squealing tires too, or?
Yep, so if they're swerving or swaying, if they've got the excessive abrupt acceleration or deceleration, the grinding of the gears, anything else, then that would count.
Right,
And I would imagine doing donuts, they're going to have excessive abrupt acceleration or deceleration. That's how you do donuts, not that I would
Yeah.
know.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, Delegate Otto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does this affect Ocean City other than it's affecting the whole state? I don't want it to mess up what they've had.
It does affect Ocean City, and we have had some correspondence with them. I put a call in to the mayor today to have more conversation with them. They have sent concerns with the legislation, and I've read through their concerns, and that's why I put in a call to the mayor, because as I read them, their concerns are already dealt with in the legislation, so everything that they wrote, for example, they said that the person who did donuts on the bridge wouldn't be covered. Actually, it would be. So I want to talk through that with the mayor and let him know that everything that they listed out is still covered under the
I
legislation.
know they testified favorable to the initial bill, but I didn't know how they felt about it.
Right. They did write in with some concerns about it. So, like I said, I've put in a call to the mayor to walk through those with him and let him know that all of those are still covered.
All right, thank you.
Okay, on the amendments, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The amendments carry. The bill's before us is amended. Is there a second? I understand Delegate Lehman, you'd like to enlighten us as to who shot who?
I would, and I thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. So I want to stress, first of all, that I appreciate all the work that has gone into considering this bill by the Motor Vehicle Subcommittee and with Delegate Love's leadership. But I'm frustrated that this bill is not going to pass and become law and again go to the governor as it did last year, but unfortunately was vetoed. But I just wanted to share with you some information I got today about the extent of this problem. I know we've heard a lot of testimony, we've seen video footage, but this is literally activity that was sent to me through the Anne Arundel County Police. And this occurred what they call a large exhibition driving event that occurred beginning Saturday evening and going into Sunday morning. That police departments were receiving intelligence during the week that there would be a large, quote, street takeover in the region that would cross several jurisdictions. It started in Prince George's, went into Howard, Anne Arundel, and Baltimore counties. In Prince George's, a pedestrian was struck. In Baltimore County, 2 vehicles struck each other. I'm going to give you some brief highlights from these different jurisdictions over a number of hours. So starting at 7 p.m. on March 25th, Anne Arundel County Police began to monitor these car groups in the DMV area. The takeover began in Prince George's County, and out-of-state and regional groups were monitored coming into different locations. A whole convoy came from Richmond, Virginia, up Maryland Route 301. In Prince George's, organizers announced that the meetup location was 2990 Donald Drive, Forestville. That was the first official location where about 300 vehicles and people gathered in a shopping center. The group then went to a major intersection in Prince George's County at Martin Luther King Jr. Highway and Ardwick-Ardmore Road. The stunt driving occurred at that intersection. Participants created a ring of fire with gasoline in the middle of the road for the cars to do stunts around. Crowd and vehicle size was estimated at 300. Prince George's County Police Department was delayed getting to the group because traffic had been stopped. When they began dispersing the group, a pedestrian was struck. In my district, at about 12:25 a.m. at Conterra Drive in Laurel, that roadway was shut down because vehicles were doing stunts. Participants were launching fireworks in the air. Crowd and vehicle size, again, around 300. The group was dispersed by police and continued on its way into Howard County. In Howard County at 1 a.m., they gathered at Columbia Gateway Drive, were immediately dispersed by Howard County and traveled on to Anne Arundel. In Anne Arundel at 1:30 a.m., a Northern District received a call at Cromwell Drive in Glen Burnie for a large crowd with cars doing burnouts. And I'm going to jump ahead to Baltimore County. At 2:13 a.m., the group arrived at 6901 Security Boulevard at Security Mall. At 2:15 a.m., 2 of the main stunt vehicles struck each other, causing airbags to deploy and moderate damage to both cars. One of the cars in that accident was confirmed stolen. I could go on and on and on. I think you all get what a problem this is. I just want to end by saying I feel really strongly that we needed to act decisively as a legislature this year on a meaningful bill to deter these incidents. I think the Senate solution, which apparently was to amend the state's reckless driving statute, does not address the many dangers of exhibition driving and the disruption that it causes. So that bill, which passed the full Senate, makes reckless driving a must-appear offense, but only when someone is killed. Our constituents deserve better. I will bring this bill back next year. I hope we can get it done, and I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Delegate Lehman, for that summary. And I just wanted to mention Security Mall, which Delegate Lehman mentioned, and is the mall I was just speaking about. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Lehman, for bringing this bill. And to be clear, your frustration is not with this committee and this bill, correct? It's across the hallway? Okay, good, because that's what I thought, but I just wanted to clarify for the record, this body is acting because this is unacceptable, and we hope that the Senate will reconsider its position when your bill crosses over. Thank you.
There appears to be no further debate, so let's all right, any announcements? Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first of all, keep an eye out in a couple of days. I think we're going to try to have a land use and ethics meeting a little bit out of order on Thursday before the session. But more importantly, moment in history. We had a little bit of a crossover break. We're back with a vengeance. One of our colleagues, when they set their mind to something, they see it through to the finish, as we've seen a little bit today. It has been 29 years since one of our colleagues took on the most powerful men in the state. The proposal at the time was to move the Washington football team's stadium to Laurel, Maryland. And it was a long fight that lasted several years. And one of our colleagues was the president of the local group Citizens Against the Stadium. And 29 years ago, she was colorfully quoted in the Baltimore Sun where she said that, "I think Governor Schaefer and Mike Miller and Cass Taylor are extremely out of touch with the people of Maryland. They make all these decisions in a vacuum. It's all about ego and power and has little to do with the taxpayers of the state." A couple of months or a little over a year later, this legislator won. She defeated all the powerful people in the state, blocking the stadium's move to Laurel. And so I think it's apropos, given our discussion during the voting session, that we put our hands together for Delegate Mary Lehman.
Well, Delegate Stein.
Sorry, subcommittee announcement. Just stay tuned for Environment Subcommittee members. We posted something about a meeting tomorrow. It may not happen then, but just stay tuned.
Okay, and I also want to let everybody know that plan to have us as a committee voting every day. We can always cancel a voting session, but just be aware that we have bills to get through. And, Delegate Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and ditto the other subcommittee chairs. Natural Resources is not meeting today, but we probably were going to schedule something, hopefully for Friday, after a couple of bills are heard in, this week in committee. Thanks.